A couple of interesting observations. First of all, about 60% of the applicants are manufacturers. They make up about 10% of the state's employers, but way overrepresented with this fund. But I think what they've realized is if they want to, because they're in a very competitive global environment, and we're in a high-cost state, in order for them to be competitive, they really need a highly skilled workforce to be really productive. So it's been very interesting to see that, but all of those companies that access that fund, they have to foot on their own 50% of the cost. So it's not free money, and they're more than willing to do that. The demand on that fund has been increasing in the last few years. I think for a couple of reasons. The economy is better. When the economy is better, companies have more resources to focus on training, and they're not just trying to survive, but figuring out how to grow. But I totally agree with JD. We hear from our members all the time, and they're willing to do this skills training. What they would like, though, are people that come into the workforce that kind of have those work readiness skills that I talked about earlier. That they know they have to be there on time. They know how to interact with coworkers. They know appropriate behaviors for the workplace. Those kind of intangible skills, but we kind of hear that over and over again, and I'm not sure what the answer is to that. Is there a role for our high schools to do a better job of preparing people for the workforce? I think we just need to think about that, but that's something we have heard a lot.
Rick, you had mentioned WIOA and the approach that is being taken by this administration and the fresh look. And I think today everyone at this conference got to see the secretaries who were so closely involved and quote-unquote aligned. Both of you have great experience in terms of policy, public policy, and its development. What do you both see as different in terms of what's taking place today and the opportunities that you mentioned earlier? What would the suggestions from both of you be in terms of where the administration should go to take advantage of the opportunities that you see? And JD, if you don't mind jumping in on this, that would be great.
Can you go first? Sure. I'll just agree with you.
Okay, yeah. What stood out for me today, and I was talking to Secretary Pizer about this separately, was the level of coordination and the way they've organized themselves from a governance perspective to meet certain challenges, right? So the governor has identified a certain set of issues. I remember he came to our meeting, Donna, back in December after he was elected, before he was inaugurated, and said something like, if we don't fix this workforce problem within my first term, then I failed. And I think what's been interesting is, okay, if that is a priority of his, he has organized his cabinet in a way through this workforce skills cabinet to directly address that, and has given them the charge to do that. So I think that the opportunity has, and by the way, I've seen it in other areas too, right? So when he, around transportation infrastructure, and this call for this fiscal control board to really get a handle on the problem. The way that he has organized his cabinet and used organizational management to address priorities has been very, very interesting to me. And I think that provides a huge opportunity with this new administration to address in a really meaningful, productive way some of the challenges that he's identified, including this one.
I agree.
You go first next time.
Yeah. No, I actually was going to say something similar. Who needs to be at the table, for this conversation? Well, obviously the business community, the education community, and the labor community, because they're all part of what will be the solution. And the fact that the governor then created this, workforce skills cabinet with those three secretaries that represent those three stakeholders, I think was very telling in itself. And all this time that I've been around AIM, I haven't seen this kind of coordination among the right cabinet secretaries representing the right stakeholders. So I think it's really important you get everybody at the table because we all are going to play a role in the solution. Too often I've seen those secretaries act more like silos, than a cabinet. So I think that's very refreshing. I said 30% of our members are in manufacturing, and we hear loudly from them about an issue that they face that doesn't confront every industry, but their workforce is older. There's 250,000 manufacturing employees in Massachusetts. Half of them will retire in the next 10 years. Just at a time when manufacturing in the United States is experiencing some resurgence, and we appreciate how vital it is to the economy here, there's a real danger if we don't have the pipeline with people with those skills. And the governor's mentioned that several times, that it's a priority of his, but there is some urgency to it given that that workforce is just older and half of them are getting ready to leave.
I'd like to just move a little to an issue that continues to be raised in terms of approach and redefining of delivery of services. Massachusetts has a network of 33 one-stop career centers to work with employers and job seekers. Do your members utilize these one-stops? Why do they, or why not? And how would they become more useful to respond, or how might they become more useful to responding to your members and hiring needs? We'll start with you, Rick.
Okay. So that's an interesting question, Stan, and I hear mixed things. I have members that really use their local career centers a lot and find them very helpful, and that they're very good at screening workers and sending them people with the right skill sets. And then I hear from other members that they're not particularly engaged and they don't feel like, and when they've tried to use the career center services, they haven't been especially helpful. So I don't, because there's 33 different career centers out there, I don't, some we hear are really good and others not so good. But I think this again is an opportunity to kind of raise the bar for all of them. I think, all of us need to do a better job. We need to do a better job of engaging our members to get them working with their, regional WIBs, with their career centers. And I think the state, entities need to do a better job of outreach. So, I think there's some work to be done by all of us to make sure that they're functioning at the highest level as possible.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add. The word that I hear most often is inconsistent. I think that's what Rick is getting at. Some do very well, some not as well. And so it's not a consistent system across the state that employers can rely on at this point. So at some point, in some areas they do, and some areas they don't, and they choose other avenues. So, but yeah, it's perfect. We must be hearing from the same members.
Just moving back a little bit to the supply chain, if you will, and you touched upon, both of you touched upon this earlier, in terms of higher education and what's needed in meeting the demands in the workforce. How would you position higher ed in the Commonwealth to take advantage and improve the supply chain in meeting that demand?
To be honest with you, I think a lot of this was answered earlier today in a couple of terrific panels. When Secretary Ash said alignment, it's becoming a little, we hear that word a lot, but that pretty much gets to the crux of it, right? So you heard the college presidents this morning talk about if curriculum is not relevant, then the institution should close. And by relevance, I think what he's talking about is it aligned with what employers need? You heard President Kennedy talk about her partnerships directly with businesses in Berkshire County. And I spend a lot of time out there and seen it. It's been remarkably successful and impactful. I think the future where this is all heading is exactly that this alignment issue has to be preeminent. You look at an institution like Northeastern University and the co-op model, you think about things like experiential learning opportunities. I think Secretary Pizer said something about the best way to prepare someone for a job is to actually have them in the job. Right? So again, going back to the survey, when employers were asked what is the most effective way to prepare workers for the workforce, it was experiential learning opportunities. So I think that has become part of this model where business and education need to be partnering more closely. Again, another theme that came up today, to maximize success.
Is that Rick?
Yeah, so I do agree that alignment is really important, as JD said. And I also think there's an opportunity to structure incentives, particularly for our public higher education schools, so the community colleges and the state colleges, that a portion of their funding maybe should depend on how successful they are in terms of aligning their programs with the needs of employers in their areas. I always find those kind of incentives can be very effective, and I think that's something that we should explore as part of this as well.
Can I just add one quick thing?
Sure.
I just had an interesting conversation at lunch with the gentleman from State Street. What's his name?
Mike Skinnell.
Mike Skinnell. And he was talking about how young workers, millennials and younger, coming into the workforce, are really dramatically changing the way businesses are reacting in a variety of ways to workforce issues. Right? So they are demanding certain things. They're demanding that companies be more socially responsible. And he was talking about how the philanthropy and CSR efforts at State Street have become part of HR because it's such an integral part of recruitment and retention. It's changed the way employers are structuring their workplace. It's changing the way employers are using technology. And I think what was interesting is I was listening to him and thinking back to the president's panel, and President Johnson talking about firing everybody because they weren't reacting and they weren't current with what this new generation was demanding. Right? So what was interesting to me was that there's these demands being placed on employers and they're reacting, and there was demands being placed on higher ed and they're reacting. I just thought that was an interesting outcome when you ask about higher ed and how they need to change and adapt with business. I think it's happening. It's being driven a lot by this younger generation of students.
No question. I'd like to just ask you both to sum up what you feel is taking place again within the Commonwealth, and any of the final thoughts you might have on today and what we should be working towards in the future. Just final thoughts, Rick.
Well, I would say we're at a very important time in terms of the economic future of Massachusetts. Again, because we have an older workforce and we're going to be seeing a lot of turnover. At the same time, I'm encouraged by the fact that our governor realizes how important this issue is, and as we've talked, he's instructed his top-level cabinet to come up with a plan to deal with this in a meaningful way. They're obviously seeking input from all of the stakeholders, so all of us in this room, I think, have an opportunity to play an important role in this. So, and as I said at the very beginning, also the new federal legislation that requires the state to develop a strategic plan, again, is just another opportunity for us to get engaged. So while workforce continues to be, a huge issue for our members, the Roundtable members, I feel like we're, also at a great turning point where we actually can make a difference. So I'm encouraged by summits like this, where we're having these conversations, and really look forward to working with this administration. Just feels like a real opportune time to make a difference.
Yeah, the word that I kept writing down in my notes was engagement. I think it's a big takeaway from today. And Rick is absolutely right. This is a really big opportunity with these folks, with the new administration in place, for us to engage. Right? The business community needs to engage. Your community, the workforce community engages. Our collective community engages. And there's a whole variety of entry points. Right? There's a whole variety of entry points that are being offered by this administration to all of us. So I kept thinking to myself, how do we engage? How do we engage? How do we engage? And I totally agree with you. This is a great time to be doing it.
Well, thank you. As part of the agreement, we'll take some questions. The agreement with Rick and JD is that we'll have a hard stop at 6 o'clock.